Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you so much for making the time. And actually, I want to start off asking, what is the GCCA Plus initiative, Mr. Zay Alves-Pereira?
Hello, thank you for having me. The GCCA, the Global Climate Change Alliance Plus, it's a European Union flagship initiative which is helping the world's most vulnerable countries to address climate change issues. Having started with just 4 pilot projects in 2008, it has become a major climate initiative that has funded over 80 national, regional, and worldwide scope in Africa, Asia, Caribbean, and the Pacific. This initiative helps mainly small islands developing states and also least developed countries, which are usually not the big polluters, but are amongst the most vulnerable. The initiative intends to increase the resilience to climate change. It also supports this group of countries in implementing their commitments resulting from the 2015 Paris Agreement on Climate Change, the COP21. This is a subject which is now very much mediatic due to the conclusion of the COP26 summit and the promise that there will be a follow-up in the next conference of parties in 2022 in Egypt. The GCCA initiative is presently funding 2 projects in Trinidad and Tobago: the construction of a solar park at the Piarco International Airport, and the project managed by the UNDP that will be the focus of our discussion today.
And thank you so much for that. Let me bring in Mr. Badrie and ask you to continue on this, giving an overview of the EU GCCA Plus initiative and its relevance to Trinidad and Tobago, as well as other countries, vulnerable countries. And it is, then we can speak a little more about the airport authority, but the relevance to countries like Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Badrie.
So the GCCA Plus initiative, as Zay mentioned, really helps target small island developing countries moving towards a more climate resilient model. What the sponsors looked at, and this project has 3 sponsors. We have the EU, which is the donor organization. We have the Ministry of Planning and Development, which is responsible for the implementation of the nationally determined targets, and the UNDP, which really focuses on the implementation using UNDP's global knowledge and experience of the key deliverables underneath the project. What the sponsors determined was that in order to move Trinidad and Tobago towards a more climate resilient model, there were 3 things that really needed addressing. The first was the demonstration of solar PV systems in and around the country. The second was filling some gaps with respect to technical assistance in the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries in terms of policy type gaps. And the third was a public awareness raising campaign that really was targeted at educating the population on renewable energy, energy efficiency, and correct pricing of electricity.
All right, now, when you speak about gaps in policy, it is one thing to say, okay, there are gaps in policy that we can have help build, but what about resource personnel as well? Because it's one thing to, okay, oh, we have the money and we're working on it, it's been implemented, but it's always nice to have persons who know how to run it when some of the partners would have left our shores. So is that something that is also being considered?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that the GCCA Plus project, or this technical assistance to the ministry does, is really source from both UNDP's global network and international consultants that UNDP may have worked with in the past, technical experts that will bring this sort of knowledge to our shores and assist the government partners in really moving this project forward, or closing the gaps that we're seeing in the technical assistance areas.
All right, Mr. Alves-Pereira would have started to speak about the solar power park initiative at the airport, and you started to speak about implementation. Many times we like to say, okay, well, what are you doing for me, as opposed to other countries, other SIDs, but give me a little more information about that park, that initiative. Thanks, Mr. Badrie.
I want to focus more on the UNDP implemented portion, Dike. I don't know if you want to target that question more to Zay, who is responsible for the Airports Authority project as well.
All right, no problem. So give me a little more info, please, Mr. Zay.
Well, one of the ways of tackling climate change is by polluting less, by using less fossil energy, thus producing more, using more renewable energies, and in our case, solar power. The idea is it's also to promote the use of these technologies in Trinidad and Tobago, which is lagging in terms of implementation of these technologies so far. But there are now promises that the country will strongly invest in this phasing out of fuel fossils and towards a greener future. The project at the PRCO International Airport is a sister project of UNDP's. They are both under the same umbrella, and they are the two projects that are currently being implemented in Trinidad and Tobago. And the idea is precisely to build a solar park. It is not a very big dimension park. It's a park with roughly 1.5 megawatts. However, the location of the airport has been chosen because it's very visible. Everybody goes to the airport, takes off, landing, bringing someone, leaving someone at the airport. So the visibility of this project is it's considerable, and it's also the dimension of I would not say educating, but of generalizing the use of solar power.
And really making a tangible statement that this is something that we're doing in Trinidad and Tobago. This is the direction that we're going, and possibly even sparking questions. And with regard to questions, Mr. Badrie, the idea of partnership, what is the significance or the impact of this kind of UNDP, the Ministry of Planning, those stakeholders that you would have itemized? Where do they come in, and what roles do they play in this partnership?
So the project really targeted NGOs, CBOs, small and micro enterprises, and government agencies. And we looked at a geographic distribution of the projects across Trinidad and Tobago, so that really the communities could see the relevance of solar in their specific area. The other thing that we did is we had a public call for sites after we did a full site selection criteria, and that call elicited more than 160 applicants from all over the Trinidad and Tobago. So it was quite a task in getting to really 12 good sites that we found right now. The process of site screening involved technical due diligence. It involved going out there and making sure that there was widespread community support for the project. And when the projects are implemented, I think it's going to touch on the lives of quite a number of people in these communities. The projects also were very broad in scope in the sense that they were projects representing the health sector, projects representing education, science and technology, community development, and projects geographically located both in Tobago and in Trinidad, northeast, southeast, southwest, southeast and central.
I think it's important that you actually have that kind of decentralization, because that also leads to some tough questions and conversations that I think are necessary, but sometimes they can be nipped in the bud. But we continue the conversation. When we return, we are speaking with Stephen Badrie as well as Zay Alves-Pereira. Stay with us. We return with more. Welcome back. We are going in depth on the GCCA plus EU-UNDP project with Mr. Stephen Badrie and Zay Alves-Pereira. And going back to you, please, for a moment, Mr. Badrie, what kind of cost are we looking at? What's the cost of this project?
So the cost of solar has fallen dramatically over the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years, with most countries or a lot of countries seeing almost grid parity with respect to solar. What that means is the price of generating a kilowatt of solar from, a kilowatt of energy from solar is actually equal to the price that you can get from the utility. This isn't the case in Trinidad right now, but we're moving there. The cost of the project, though, if that's what we're talking about, the initiative that UNDP's managed is 2.4 million euros, and that cost is actually most going towards the equipment and the consultations for the technical assistance, things like that. It's not going directly to any beneficiary. So the recipients of the project they're not going to get a sum of money to implement a solar. We are actually implementing the solar project for them, training them in the maintenance and operations of it, and ensuring that it's safe and reliable to operate.
All right, and I appreciate the fact that you say that the price has dropped, because I remember one of the things that was a little prohibitive at a point in time was you make back your investment, but it takes a little while from that initial investment. So it seems as though that process is a little swifter now? And
it's still, based on the current situation we have in Trinidad, with so little uptake in solar, the prices are still going to be a little bit challenging. But what we need to focus on is not the cost only, the benefits, right? The benefit is you could do your part in ensuring that we are moving towards a more climate resilient, country. We are lowering our carbon emissions and making sure that the future generations do benefit from our actions today.
And you say that, and you make me want to dive into the whole conversation of national determined contributions and this sort of thing. But even before we get to that, let me bring back Zay into the conversation. Mr. Alves-Pereira, Mr. Badrie started to speak about it, but give us go a little further inside the criteria that you look to say, okay, well, these are what we are going to do, or these are the things that we're looking at to select sites, please.
Well, renewable energies is clearly one of the top priorities of the European Union. This falls within what we have designated as the Green Deal. And the Green Deal is not just for the European Union by the Europeans. The Green Deal is something that it has to be global. We know that the problem will not be solved if we tackle it as only as our own problem. And actually, the Caribbean states are amongst the countries that are most vulnerable to climate change. So in the selection of projects, we have a broad scope. In terms of climate change, they go substantially through the channeling for the production of renewable energies, solar, wind, also the hydrogen as an energy carrier, but also in terms of mitigating the effects of the heavy industry and the fossil fuels use, like CO2 sequestration and evolution, innovation in terms of the technology used, for example, in the case of gas, which is very important for the Trinbagonian economy. and it is an energy that will still prevail, we believe, for the next 15, 20, 25 years as gapping the bridge towards a more sustainable future where energy would be ideally produced just from renewable sources. So we also have concerns in terms of biodiversity, in terms of preserving the natural resources, forests, biodiversity, as I said, and also the marine ecosystems are very important because, as you know, the sea and water, it's the vast majority of our planet, and thanks to the consequences of climate change is not also getting any better. So there's a lot to do as well in that area. In the case of Trinidad and Tobago, we went towards solar. Perhaps it is an easy and obvious solution. It is obvious because Trinidad and Tobago have a strong potential for solar. I mean, we are not far from the equator. Also, the potential for wind power, particularly in the east coast of Trinidad, and also in the central part of the island. This was the basis for the choice of the project, as well as the visibility that this project would give for renewable energies as a whole, and also for the European Union as a partner of Trinidad and Tobago.
And I want to thank you for that. You actually answered the last question I had for you and led me into Mr. Badrie's closing remarks. In terms of partnerships, what does the future look like with regard to the EU and TNT, Mr. Badrie?
I think we have a very healthy relationship with the EU right now. I know Zia and I have been speaking at length on potentially upcoming projects. We're looking to see how we can help move the needle forward, right, with respect to climate resilience in Trinidad and Tobago. And while we haven't nailed out anything concrete as yet, I know that we're working towards getting something going.
Thank you so much. Green Diplomacy Program Officer, EU Delegation to Trinidad and Tobago, Alves-Pereira, and the Project Manager GCCA plus UNDP, Stephen Badrie. On behalf of our entire news team, I'm Dike Rostant. This has been In Depth with me. Thank you for joining us.